White cop lies about black woman in court, not knowing she's a high-ranking Navy SEAL. The pulsing blue and red lights in her rearview mirror painted the late afternoon sky in strobing hues of emergency. Sarah sighed, signaling and pulling her Volvo to the shoulder of Elm Street. Another delay. She killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the chirping of crickets in the nearby overgrown field. Detective Raymond Maxwell emerged from his cruiser, his broad shoulders filling the already cramped space between her car and his. The setting sun glinted off his aviator sunglasses, obscuring his eyes and adding to his already imposing presence. He sauntered toward her, a barely perceptible smirk playing on his lips. "License and registration," he barked, his voice gravelly, as he leaned down to peer into her window. Sarah met his gaze steadily, a flicker of annoyance in her usually placid expression. "Good evening, officer. May I ask why I was pulled over?" Maxwell straightened, the smirk widening. "You were going 38 in a 30 zone, ma'am. Do you know how dangerous that is?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware. The speed limit sign is partially obscured by overgrown branches. I'd be happy to point it out to you." She reached into her glove compartment, retrieving the requested documents. Her movements were deliberate, controlled. He snatched the papers from her hand. Excuses. Everyone's got one." He examined the license, his eyes scanning back and forth, lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Sarah Johnson. Nice car. Must be doing all right." "I work hard," she replied, her voice even. Maxwell grunted. "We'll see about that." He returned to his cruiser, the slam of the door echoing in the twilight. Sarah watched him through her mirror, his silhouette hunched over the dashboard. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to remain calm. Confrontation wasn't her preferred method of engagement, but she wouldn't back down from injustice. He returned a few minutes later, the citation clutched in his hand. The smirk was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped expression. "Here you go, Ms. Johnson. Court date is on the ticket. Don't be late." Sarah took the ticket, her eyes scanning the details. "Officer, I'd like to see the radar reading that confirms my speed." Maxwell scoffed. "Don't get smart with me. I saw you speeding. That's all I need. With all due respect, officer, I have a right to see the evidence against me." Her voice remained calm, but a steeliness had crept in. She wouldn't be bullied. His face flushed. "Look, lady, I'm giving you a break. It's just a speeding ticket. Sign it and be on your way. I'm not asking for a break. I'm asking for transparency. I believe there's a reasonable chance this ticket was issued in error." She held his gaze, unflinching. Maxwell's hand tightened around his pen. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You know, Ms. Johnson, it's people like you who make this job so damn difficult. Always questioning, always demanding. You think you're so much better than everyone else." He straightened, tossing the pen onto her dashboard. "Fine. Have it your way." He scribbled something illegible on the citation and shoved it back towards her. "Have a nice day. And try to obey the speed limit." He turned and stalked back to his cruiser, the red and blue lights once again illuminating the darkening street. Sarah watched him drive away, the taste of injustice bitter on her tongue. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Lies and testimony. Raymond Maxwell straightened his tie, a smirk playing on his lips as he approached the stand. He raised his right hand, the oath rolling off his tongue with the practiced ease of a seasoned liar. He settled in, making eye contact with the judge, a subtle, almost imperceptible nod passing between them. "Officer Maxwell," the prosecutor began, "can you please describe the events of the evening of October 27th? Ray's voice, usually gruff, took on a tone of measured authority. "At approximately 22:17 hours, I observed a vehicle matching the defendant's description exceeding the speed limit on Elm Street. I initiated a traffic stop. The driver, Ms. Johnson, became immediately belligerent, raising her voice and refusing to provide her license and registration in a timely manner. She was uncooperative and disrespectful throughout the entire encounter." He paused, adding a touch of theatrical sincerity. I attempted to de-escalate the situation, but she continued to escalate, becoming increasingly agitated. He even managed a wounded expression. I was forced to issue a citation for speeding and resisting a lawful order. Sarah watched, her jaw tight. Each word was a calculated fabrication, a deliberate attempt to paint her as some kind of unruly menace. When it was her turn, she walked to the stand, her navy bearing evident in her ramrod posture. Ms. Johnson, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do, she replied, her voice clear and steady, a stark contrast to Ray's carefully constructed narrative. She calmly recounted the evening, each detail crisp and precise. Officer Maxwell pulled me over without cause. I was not speeding. I presented my license and registration immediately. I asked him why I was being stopped, and he refused to answer. I remained calm and polite throughout the entire interaction. And do you have any evidence to support your claims, Ms. Johnson? The prosecutor asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. Yes, I do. I have dashcam footage of the entire incident. Sarah nodded to her lawyer, who approached the bench with a USB drive. The video played, the small courtroom suddenly filled with the mundane reality of a traffic stop. The audio was clear, Sarah's calm, measured questions, Ray's escalating frustration, the distinct lack of speeding. Judge Thompson leaned forward, a frown etching itself onto his face. He cleared his throat, a sound that echoed loudly in the silent room. Ms. Johnson, he said, his voice laced with impatience. This footage is inconclusive. It does not definitively prove you were not speeding. Your Honor, Sarah began, fighting to keep the anger from her voice. The footage clearly shows I was maintaining the speed limit. Officer Maxwell's claim is demonstrably false. Thompson waved a dismissive hand. The court finds Officer Maxwell's testimony credible. The footage is, at best, circumstantial. Ms. Johnson, I advise you to accept the plea bargain offered by the prosecution. It would be in your best interest. He slammed his gavel down. Next case. Sarah stared, stunned. The courtroom swam before her eyes. Justice, she realized, wasn't blind. It was wearing a badge and a robe, and they were both looking the other way. As she left the courtroom, she felt a cold resolve harden within her. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Commander Johnson. The slam of the apartment door echoed the finality of the gavel. Guilty. The words still vibrated in Sarah's ears, a discordant note in the otherwise quiet hum of the city outside. She kicked off her heels, the polished leather landing with a dull thud on the worn rug. Each step felt heavier than the last as she moved through the cramped space, shedding the tailored suit piece by piece, armor that hadn't protected her after all. She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back was tight, etched with a weariness that settled deep in her bones. Disappointment stung, but beneath it, a familiar resolve began to simmer. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. Reaching into the back of the closet, she pulled down a heavy duffel bag. Not designer, not stylish. Practical. Inside, nestled amongst folded fatigues, were the things that truly defined her. She unzipped the bag, her fingers tracing the raised lettering on a worn leather wallet. Commander Sarah Johnson. It felt like a lifetime ago she'd last held it. The apartment transformed as she moved through it. The civilian clothes were tossed aside, replaced by the comfortable weight of well-worn jeans and a simple t-shirt. The polite, restrained facade she'd worn in court dissolved, replaced by a steely glint in her eyes. This wasn't the life she'd imagined when she traded the open ocean for this city. But duty, she knew, took many forms. She walked into the living room, the walls there a testament to a life lived far beyond the confines of this apartment. Framed certificates lined one wall, commendations for bravery, strategic planning, and unwavering leadership. Medals, gleaming under the soft light of a table lamp, filled a small display case. A photograph, taken somewhere in the dusty expanse of Afghanistan, showed her younger self, dirt-streaked and grinning, surrounded by her team. Sarah ran a hand over the cool glass of the display case. Those men and women, the sacrifices they made, The trust they placed in her, it fueled her now. She wouldn't let Ray Maxwell's lie tarnish their honor or hers. She settled in front of her computer, the glow of the screen illuminating her determined face. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating search engines and databases with practiced ease. Ray Maxwell. She needed to know everything. Where he lived, who he knew, what drove him. The digital breadcrumbs he'd left behind would tell a story, and she intended to uncover it all. The clock ticked past midnight, each second a beat in the rhythm of her plan. The unfairness of the trial still stung, but it also sharpened her focus. She wouldn't let them break her. She would fight back, not with anger, but with the precision and unwavering resolve that had defined her career. This wasn't a courtroom battle anymore. This was a mission. And Commander Johnson never failed a mission. Digging up the past. Sarah punched a rapid sequence into her encrypted phone. A fleeting glimpse of the Navy crest preceded the secure chat window's appearance. Her fingers danced across the virtual keyboard. Need a comprehensive profile. Raymond Maxwell, badge number 478, Metro PD. Investigate all grievances and internal probes, prioritizing encounters with minority civilians. Keep it confidential. Eyes only. A moment later, the reply pinged. Acknowledged. 48 hours. The digital affirmation offered scant relief against the white-hot anger simmering inside. 48 hours felt like an age. She sank back into the worn leather of her office chair, its groan a mournful echo. Courtroom echoes resurfaced. The judge's indifferent rap of the gavel, the jurors' expressions, a blend of disbelief and pity, stoked her inner fire. Those days inched by with agonizing slowness. She plunged into legal research, forging an unassailable appeal. Sleep became a forgotten indulgence. On the third morning, the phone vibrated, the screen displaying a single word. Delivered. The data arrived as a series of heavily shielded files, each chronicling a distinct transgression. The first detailed a case from half a decade earlier, a young Latino man, arrested for drug possession. Though charges were later dismissed due to lack of evidence, the ordeal irrevocably tainted his life. The arresting officer? Raymond Maxwell. The scenario was disturbingly familiar: inconsistent testimonies, dubious probable cause, and Maxwell's unwavering, damning account. Sarah absorbed each file with grim focus. A chilling pattern crystallized. A black youth facing assault charges, a Native American woman accused of resisting arrest. Each instance cast Maxwell as a man whose perception of justice was warped by prejudice, a man who wielded his badge as a weapon of bias. The details were devastating: tarnished reputations, forfeited careers, lives derailed by the burden of fabricated accusations. She unearthed internal affairs reports, buried deep within digital archives, documenting complaints against Maxwell that were either dismissed or minimized. One lieutenant, speaking anonymously, characterized Maxwell as overzealous, but fundamentally a good cop. Sarah snorted derisively. Overzealous? This was a deliberate campaign of abuse. Methodically, she began compiling the evidence, arranging the files, highlighting the discrepancies, the outright falsehoods. The sheer volume of material was staggering, a stark indictment of the institutional failures that allowed Maxwell to operate with impunity. A steely resolve hardened within her. This was no longer simply about her plight. It was about every soul wounded by Raymond Maxwell. It was about exposing the festering corruption within the system, a malady threatening to engulf everything. She wouldn't allow it to spread further. The reporter's angle. The City Gazette archive, under its buzzing, listless fluorescent lights, smelled of aged paper as Evelyn Hayes navigated the microfiche reader. Ray Maxwell, the name, once a mere rumor from a source at the courthouse, something about Maxwell's tendencies, now choked her. 3 days deep, she was drowning in too many strange parallels. The grainy 2018 article glared back from the screen. Robbery suspect apprehended thanks to police. There stood Maxwell, younger, almost zealous, next to a cuffed black man, his face a mask of stern satisfaction. The story was cut and dry. A clear-cut case, criminal nabbed in the act. But Evelyn had already spotted the flaws. A green behind theirs public defender had raised alarms about procedural breaches, questionable witness testimony, and a forced confession. Case closed nonetheless. Evelyn noted the lawyer's name, a thread to pull. As she pressed on, a growing sense of disquiet gnawed at her. Every case involving Maxwell echoed the same refrain: hasty investigations, flimsy evidence, and sentences far exceeding the crime for black defendants. The next morning, Evelyn found herself in a stuffy community center, the air thick with stale coffee and unspoken grievances. Across the small table sat Mrs. Eleanor Davis, her eyes filled with a bottomless fatigue. Her son had been taken in by Maxwell 2 years prior, accused of dealing. They claimed they found the stuff in his car. Mrs. Davis whispered, her voice raspy. But my boy, he doesn't even smoke. He's holding down 2 jobs. He's got no room for that. Evelyn listened, pen flying across the notepad. Mrs. Davis recounted how Maxwell had dismissed her concerns out of hand, how his eagerness to be done with the case was palpable. He looked at my son like he was already judged, she croaked, her voice breaking. Like he was nothing. The interview left Evelyn unsettled. Back at the Gazette, the newsroom clamor, keyboards clicking, phones jangling, felt jarringly discordant against the quiet despair she had just absorbed. She sought out Harding in his cramped office, the air saturated with the pungent sweetness of pipe tobacco. Harding, Evelyn began, her voice clipped. I think Maxwell's got a pattern going. Harding leaned back, eyes narrowing. Pattern of what, Hayes? Exemplary police work? Evelyn laid out the connected inconsistencies, the fishy cases, the slipped procedures, the unheard cries. It's more than just oversights, Harding. It feels intentional. Like he is singling out the black population. Harding puffed, a smoky veil obscuring his features. That's heavy, Hayes. You'll need more than a hunch. You need tangible proof. I know, Evelyn affirmed, her jaw tight. But I believe it's there. I just require enough time to secure it. Harding scrutinized her, his expression a blank slate. All right, Hayes. I will allow you 1 week. But if you don't come back with anything definite by then. He let the ultimatum hang, unspoken, heavy. Evelyn nodded, resolution hardening her gaze. A week. Not much, but sufficient. She had a narrative to expose, the truth to bring to light. And she would not permit Ray Maxwell to remain in darkness. Confrontation at the courthouse. The courthouse doors slammed behind Sarah, the echo underscoring the guilty verdict. A press of reporters swarmed, their microphones jabbing like insistent prods. Ignoring the clamor, her attention locked on Raymond Maxwell, positioned near his cruiser, smug satisfaction plastered across his features. He exuded the air of a man celebrating victory. She advanced toward him, the oppressive humidity clinging to her, heat shimmering off the blacktop. Noticing her approach, he stiffened, a fleeting expression, perhaps apprehension, momentarily fracturing his self-assured mask. Officer Maxwell, Sarah stated, her tone a low, resolute threat amidst the surrounding commotion. A word, please. He scoffed, a rasping exhale of air. About what, Johnson? Enjoying the state-sponsored accommodations? Sarah produced a thick manila envelope from her satchel. Concerning this, she extended it. Evidence you believed was safely hidden. Proof of your long-standing misconduct, the pattern of bias, the deceptions. He recoiled slightly, eyes slitting. Fabrications. Pure invention. Really? Sarah challenged, opening the envelope and removing a time-worn photograph. Jamal Williams ring a bell? Shoplifting charge conveniently dropped? His mother remembers you vividly, officer. She recalls your threat to ensure her son never amounted to anything unless she cooperated. She brandished another document, a transcript of an internal affairs inquiry. And Maria Rodriguez? False arrest, undue force? That IA investigation vanished with remarkable speed, didn't it? Crimson stained Ray's face. That's ancient history. Water under the bridge. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter to whom, officer? Certainly those whose lives you've deliberately dismantled might disagree. As might the Navy JAG reviewing this case. Sarah watched for his reaction. The Navy? His voice wavered, the arrogance fracturing. What's the Navy got to do with this? Everything, Sarah replied, her voice gaining resonance. I'm offering you a lifeline, Maxwell. A chance to mitigate the fallout. Confess. Acknowledge your falsehoods. Cooperate with the inquiry. It won't undo the damage inflicted, but it could soften the blow. He barked out a laugh, a booming, hollow sound that ricocheted off the building's facade. You think I fear you, Johnson? Some bogus evidence? You think you can touch me? I'm Metro PD, untouchable. He puffed up, his hand instinctively edging toward his sidearm. You're insignificant. Just another disgruntled black woman playing the race card. Sarah met his gaze, absorbing the weight of his blatant disregard. The opportunity for atonement had passed, wasted. You've sealed your fate, officer. Don't claim I didn't caution you. She gathered the documents, her movements precise and deliberate. Consider this my formal notification. This is no longer solely about me, Officer Maxwell. This is about accountability. And accountability is breathing down your neck. She pivoted and strode away, leaving him stranded in the harsh sunlight, his bravado replaced by a nascent tremor of apprehension. The Navy's net was closing, and Raymond Maxwell had just ensured he'd be caught. Gathering evidence. The air in the precinct interrogation room was thick with Ray Maxwell's cheap cologne, a pathetic attempt to mask the sweat slicking his brow. Sarah sat across from him, hands folded neatly on the table, a picture of calm that belied the fury simmering beneath her skin. Her phone, innocently placed beside her water bottle, was actively recording. So, Officer Maxwell, she began, her voice smooth as silk. You maintain that I resisted arrest? Ray shifted in his chair, the leather squeaking under his weight. That's what I reported, ma'am. The ma'am felt like a deliberate jab, a condescending attempt to assert his authority. And you reported that I became aggressive, even violent? Sarah pressed, her eyes unwavering. Yes. You were agitated. He stammered slightly, avoiding her gaze. Agitated because you illegally stopped me, searched my vehicle without probable cause, and then fabricated a story to justify your actions? Sarah's voice remained even, but the edge was unmistakable. Ray puffed out his chest, a pathetic imitation of confidence. I followed procedure. You were the one who escalated the situation. Sarah leaned forward, her gaze intense. Let's talk about procedure, Officer Maxwell. Isn't it standard procedure to activate your body cam during a traffic stop? Where's the footage? He paled, the color draining from his face like water from a leaky faucet. There was a malfunction. Sarah smiled, a predatory curve of her lips. A malfunction? How convenient. Almost as convenient as the fact that you couldn't find any drugs in my car, despite your insistence I was trafficking them. I had reasonable suspicion, he insisted, but his voice wavered. Reasonable suspicion based on what, Officer Maxwell? The color of my skin? Sarah's voice dropped, laced with a dangerous calm. Or perhaps the fact that I politely refused your advances a few weeks ago at O'Malley's? Ray's eyes widened, the smug arrogance replaced by stark fear. He licked his lips nervously. That's not true. Isn't it? Funny, I remember you mentioning you were on duty that night, patrolling my neighborhood. Funny how a simple rejection can turn into this. Sarah gestured around the room. Tell me, Officer Maxwell, how does it feel to know you abused your power? Unbeknownst to Ray, Evelyn watched the scene unfold from behind the one-way mirror. Her initial skepticism had evaporated, replaced by a burning conviction. She'd seen enough. The sweat beading on Ray's forehead, the way his hands trembled in his lap, the almost imperceptible shake of his head when Sarah mentioned O'Malley's. It all screamed guilt. The recording Sarah surreptitiously made was the cherry on top. Ray Maxwell had dug his own grave. Ray, trapped in Sarah's web of calculated questions, finally cracked. Okay, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Maybe I embellished a little. Embellished? Sarah echoed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You lied, Officer Maxwell. You lied under oath. You abused your power. You almost ruined my life. Evelyn knew the fight wasn't over, but in that moment, watching Raymond Maxwell crumble, she felt a surge of hope. Justice, it seemed, might finally be within reach. The truth would come out. Internal Affairs. The fluorescent lights of the Internal Affairs office hummed, a relentless buzz that amplified Sarah's anxiety. Across the steel table, Detective Miller flipped through the files Sarah had painstakingly compiled: witness statements, financial records, and the digital recording of Ray Maxwell's confession. He was a man carved from granite, his face unreadable, his eyes the color of a winter sky. This is substantial, Commander Johnson, Miller finally said, his voice a low rumble. Sarah leaned forward, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. It's the truth. Maxwell fabricated evidence, perjured himself in court, and abused his power to harass me. That recording. Miller held up a hand. We've listened to it, Commander. Several times. The language is suggestive. But motive is always the sticking point. Motive? Sarah's voice rose. He wanted to destroy my career. He resented my rank, my position. He saw me as a threat. Miller sighed, a sound like air leaking from a tire. We understand that, Commander. However, the defense Maxwell is mounting paints a picture of a misunderstanding. An overzealous officer acting on what he believed to be credible intelligence. Sarah's stomach twisted. Credible intelligence? He planted the drugs in my car. The following day, Ray Maxwell swaggered into the same Internal Affairs office, a picture of casual arrogance. He leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. So, this is about Johnson's little vendetta, huh? Some bruised egos, a few hurt feelings. Nothing to see here, folks. Detective Miller, however, was not buying it. Commander Johnson has presented evidence of potential misconduct, Detective Maxwell. We're required to investigate. Ray's smirk faltered. He shifted uncomfortably. Look, I admit things got heated. She was uncooperative, aggressive. I may have embellished a few details in my report, but it was all in the interest of public safety. Embellished? Miller raised an eyebrow. You testified under oath that you witnessed Commander Johnson conducting a drug deal. Is that an embellishment, Detective? Ray's face flushed. It was a judgment call. I believed I saw something. My instincts were telling me. The interrogation stretched on, Ray's confident facade slowly crumbling under Miller's relentless questioning. He stammered, contradicted himself, and finally fell silent, his arrogance replaced by a palpable fear. Across town, Evelyn Hayes slammed her laptop shut, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. The article was finished, meticulously researched, and ready for publication. It detailed Ray Maxwell's history of misconduct, his targeting of minority communities, and the inconsistencies in his testimony against Sarah Johnson. She titled it simply, Corrupt Cop, The Maxwell Files. With a click, she sent it to her editor, knowing the story would explode like a bomb, shattering Ray Maxwell's career and exposing the rot within the department. Justice served. The courtroom air hung thick and heavy, saturated with anticipation. Sarah sat ramrod straight on the witness stand, her navy blues a stark contrast to the polished wood and hushed whispers. Ray Maxwell, seated at the defendant's table, kept his eyes fixed forward, a muscle twitching in his jaw. The smugness that had characterized his every interaction with her had begun to fray at the edges, replaced by a gnawing apprehension. Ms. Johnson, the prosecutor began, his voice calm but firm. Could you please recount the events of the evening in question? Sarah met his gaze, her voice steady despite the tremor that threatened to betray her nerves. She recounted the fabricated traffic stop, the escalating harassment, the blatant lies woven into his official report. She omitted nothing, laying bare the injustice she had endured. He thought, she said, her voice ringing with conviction, he could use his badge to silence me. He thought he could bury the truth. Maxwell shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Then came the moment Sarah had anticipated, the moment that would either shatter his carefully constructed facade or leave her credibility in ruins. "Your Honor," the prosecutor announced, "we would like to introduce Exhibit A, an audio recording of a conversation between the defendant, Raymond Maxwell, and a confidential informant." The recording played, the courtroom falling silent save for the distorted voice of Maxwell bragging about framing Sarah, about how untouchable he believed himself to be. The blood drained from Maxwell's face. He opened his mouth to object, but the words caught in his throat. The prosecutor followed with photographs, the doctored police report, the falsified witness statements, each piece of evidence a nail hammered into the coffin of Maxwell's deceit. Evelyn Hayes, from the investigative news outlet, sat in the gallery, her face alight with triumph. Her exposé, fueled by Sarah's unwavering resolve, was about to break, promising to expose the rot that had festered within the city's police department. The jury deliberated for hours. The tension was almost unbearable. Finally, the bailiff announced their return. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Maxwell, his face ashen, stared blankly ahead. "In the matter of the state versus Raymond Maxwell," the jury foreman announced, his voice resonating through the silent courtroom. "We the jury find the defendant guilty." A collective gasp swept through the room. Maxwell's composure crumbled. He slumped in his chair, defeated. Justice, at long last, had been served. Days later, Sarah stood on the deck of the USS Dauntless, the salt spray stinging her face. She was back in uniform, back with her team. The weight of the trial had lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. She addressed her team, her voice clear and strong. "We defend the principles of justice, both at home and abroad. Today, we recommit ourselves to that mission." The crew responded with a resounding "Hoo-yah!" Sarah smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. The fight had been a hard one, but the victory was worth it. The system had been tested, and while scarred, it had not broken. And she, Sarah Johnson, had played her part in ensuring that justice prevailed.